And so this would be a special day for Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, no question. The day that 69 years ago we were able to declare statehood once again after a 2,000-year diaspora. So it's truly a monumental time. And then 50 years after the unification of Yerushalayim just 3 weeks later. Pretty amazing time. Okay. We are on page 265. Welcome back to Patricia Rucker after a long absence. Good to have you back. The first section of the third essay was Rabbi Yehuda Halevi telling us what a saintly person or a pious person is not. A pious person is not someone who secludes himself from the physical world and from other people. Solitude and isolation are unhealthy for the vast majority of human beings. We are social animals and we require human interaction, and we also require some level of indulgence in the physical world in order to thrive. That is the will of God. That is what Hashem wants us to do. He doesn't want us to withdraw from this world. He wants us to use this world and elevate it. So, the next step of our discussion, therefore, is in paragraph number 2. So if you've now told me what a saintly person is not, tell me what a saintly person is. The KUZARI said, if so, tell me what the behavior of your saintly people is today. And I think the reason why he says the word today is because today we don't have a temple. Today we don't have prophecy, as we've established previously in this book. And so therefore, how would you gauge a person who is a saint, who is truly what he calls a Chassid, a pious individual? So, paragraph number 3, the rabbi said, a saintly person is one who is concerned with his country. He provides all its citizens with their every provision and need. He leads them justly, does not oppress any one of them, and does not give to any one of them more than his rightful share. Thus, in his time of need, they will come to his aid, and will rush to respond to him when he calls out to them. He can command them, and they will carry out his command. He can admonish them, and they will accept his admonishment. Sounds like a pious person. That's not at all a pious person. That's a description of some great world leader, right? Or some general of an army. What does this have to do with a chassid, with a pious person? That's the KUZARI's question. The KUZARI said, I asked you about a saintly person, not a leader. What we call in Hebrew a Moshel, a ruler. This is not the description of a chassid. So the rabbi said, the saintly person is a leader, or maybe perhaps more correctly translated, is a ruler. All of his senses and attributes, both spiritual and physical, submit themselves to his command. He thus leads them just like a real world leader. As it says, he who rules his spirit is greater than one who captures a city. He has shown that he is fit to govern, that were he to rule over a country, he would preside over it justly, just as he has done with his own body and soul. So, straight off, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi has created this analogy that he's going to continue over the next couple of pages. In describing the perfect definition of a person who is saintly or pious, it is a person who has complete control over all of his subjects. But control over his subjects is the subjects that are contained within, the self-control. In other words, and what Rabbi Yehuda Halevi essentially says is that if a person can show that sense of discipline to control all of the conflicting forces that exist within himself, then this is an indication that if that person were put to the test to control things on a macro scale, to control a government, that person would probably do a pretty good job. In other words, you can sort of correlate the two, more or less, he says, to say that if a person has self-control, then that is probably an indicator that they can control other things beyond what is contained within the self. But conversely, if a person has very little self-control, that's probably a sign that they're not going to be a very effective leader or ruler. Now, okay, well, just a second. I'm not sure how much that has borne truth in the real world. Go ahead, Mrs. Safar.
I was just going to say the description reminds me of the Gedolim in Israel, who are such saintly people and never seek any political office, but with one sentence, they can really mobilize thousands and thousands of their followers because those followers respect them so much.
Because they've earned the respect of their followers. Well, I think that one has to be very careful. You'll forgive me, whether we're talking about religious leaders or whether we're talking about political leaders, to make the exact correlation. There are times, in other words, what I'm saying is you can't gauge a person's piety, even in the religious world, based on how much authority he wields within that religious society. Just because a person is deemed to be a gadol and another person is less of a gadol, and when we say gadol, what do I mean? I mean that he wields political authority within that religious milieu, right? Does that mean that you can say, well, because he has 10,000 adherents that sort of submit to his authority, and that guy only has a small little kehillah, then that's a sign that this guy is a bigger gadol than that guy?
Well, obviously it's not our place to judge who's a bigger gadol and who's not. Only Hashem can judge that.
Right. But
his description, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi's description, just sounded like what I hear about the gedolim in Israel.
Right, right. And that's why I say, in other words, I think that as a generalization it's true. Someone who has shown the ability to control his own internal faculties is also demonstrating, at least to himself, if to no one else, that he can control things that are outside himself effectively, and that he would be able to govern effectively.
You can even, like, if I think about when Moshe Feinstein in the United States 30 years ago, you know, he also was a little man in a little shul on the Lower East Side and didn't do anything to try to garner adherents, but just by virtue of his piety and scholarship, he got so many followers.
Yes, but there are also people that are known as nistarim, hidden pious people. You see, the reason, if we wanted to analyze it sociologically, the reason why Rav Moshe garnered so many adherents is because even though he was not looking for fame and glory, he did accept upon himself the mantle of halachic leadership. In other words, he was clearly the greatest scholar, or one of the greatest scholars of his generation. And therefore, when people came and asked him a question, he didn't shy away from offering his opinion. But there are other pious people who say, I don't feel that I would like to enter into that fray. I don't want to enter into that realm of halachic authority. They may be just as pious in their personal self-control, but that doesn't necessarily mean that just because a person doesn't accept the mantle of external leadership doesn't mean that they're not pious. So, you know, the point that I thought you were going to get to, that I was trying to bring out, is that if a person does not have really what, by inference, what Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is trying to suggest, is that if a person does not exercise self-control, then he's suggesting, I think by inference, that that's an indication that they're not really going to be a very effective, or they're going to be at least a flawed leader or a flawed ruler. And we have examples of people who were brilliant generals and tacticians and politicians who had very, very flawed personal lives, who were given to philandering and all kinds of mischievous behavior. And yet, for some reason, they were effective political or military leaders, right? So it doesn't always translate, but invariably, what Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is saying is that if you can't control your own urges and your own faculties and all of the conflicting thoughts and urges that are contained within yourself, then at some point that will manifest in the way that you lead as well. And I'm just thinking of one of the former mayors of Toronto. And this person was a very highly regarded leader of the city, but in his own personal life, he was very, very flawed. But at some point, and it wasn't just because his personal life caught up with him, but there were certain antics that he had practiced publicly, which also displayed a lack of self-control, that also got him into some trouble as well. And that, you know, that I think, the point is that what he's trying to say is that when a person can exercise self-control, he's showing leadership. He's showing the capability to be a leader. Because I have to lead myself before I can lead anyone else that's external to me. And if you want to gauge whether or not you have leadership qualities, one of the ways to gauge it is, am I truly thoughtful about myself and the various different conflicts that are contained within myself, and how am I dealing with the issues that I am struggling with, and how am I addressing them? If you shy away from the internal conflicts, then there's a good chance that when conflicts arise around you, you'll shy away from them as well. If you directly address the conflicts that are within you, then that's probably a good indicator that you'll be capable of addressing external conflicts should they arise in your environment. Yes?
I don't think any of those descriptions apply to leaders in the world outside of Torah, because to me, to become a leader in the outside world, you have to be powerful, you have to have charisma, you have to be well-connected, you have to have money, and all of those things lead people to not have self-control in their personal lives. And you say there have been a few people and leaders in public life who haven't had control. I would say most of them have not. It's the rare man like Mike Pence who says he won't have dinner with any woman other than his wife.
Well, notice I didn't mention any names, but okay. But he's a good example. You know.
He's a rarity. That's why everybody remarks on it.
Yeah.
Most of the leaders are like Trump, you know, who have no self-control in his personal life, but that's not a prerequisite for being a leader in the outside world. It's only in the Torah world that it's a prerequisite.
Well, perhaps applying it to modern politics, it would not be apt. But in order to be able to, I don't think it's just limited to Judaism. I think it's limited to any moral society. In a moral society, people are looking to a leader not only for political savvy, but also to act as a beacon and to act as an example. Perhaps it's an indication of the breakdown of the moral fabric of our society, that our society doesn't really care about the moral turpitude of its leaders. And maybe that's a problem. But in any event, this is what Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is suggesting, that he has shown that he is fit to govern, that were he to rule over a country, he would preside over it justly, just as he has done with his own body and soul. Okay. Now, before we go any further, I would like to go over with you a text from the Rambam, from Maimonides, where he makes a distinction between a ruler and a pious person and a Chassid. You see, and the reason why I feel that this is an interesting discussion to have at this particular juncture is because here we have an example of Rabbi Yehuda Halevi saying that a pious person is a ruler. He is a ruler. And the Rambam creates not a comparison, but a contrast between a pious person and a ruler. Now, you may recall that we've discussed in the past, did the Rambam ever read Rabbi Yehuda Halevi's KUZARI? We know that Rabbi Yehuda Halevi died around the year 1140, and the Rambam was born in the year 1135 or 1138, depending upon which historical record you follow. So he never met Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, and but we know that the KUZARI was published in the Rambam's lifetime. So the question is, did the Rambam ever read it? Well, he never makes direct reference to it, but as we've pointed out in the past, just because the Rambam